Rish, I'm fascinated to know, and I'm sure everyone in this market would be fascinated to know, about playing under the pressure of a Canadian market, because a lot of talk here in Toronto was the market's too tough. And then Leon Draisaitl came out and he said, well, it's a Canadian market, hockey is everything, but we can handle it. What does that mean, they can handle it? Does that just mean they don't care about what anybody says and they go out and they're the best players in the world? How do you describe the way the two best players in the world handle the pressure of a Canadian market?
Okay. So this is a tough one for me to answer without sounding like, I mean, I cover the Oilers, but you guys know me. I don't cheer. I'm not a fan. I cover it straight.
Neither do we, Rish. So, neither do we.
Yeah.
Journalism.
Sure.
Journalism.
Yeah.
We're journalists here.
Yeah. Come on now.
I'm going to sound, whatever. I'll just give you an answer. Those guys can handle it because in the final analysis, in the biggest moments, they aren't on the back of milk cartons, and they never have been. They've been good in the biggest moments. So whether the Oilers win or the Oilers lose, in the biggest moments these guys have had to face in their time here, they have showed up and been pushing it in the right direction. Where it gets difficult in these Canadian markets is where you're the highest paid players with the most pressure, and you have these massive moments, and you don't come through in those moments. So the narrative builds. So why does Leon Draisaitl feel like he can handle it? Look at his points per game in the playoffs. Why does Connor McDavid feel like, sure, maybe it gets a little testy with the media now and then, but at the end of the day, I can handle it? Look at his points per game in the playoffs and his production when it matters the most. So it's the culmination of year after year where the highest paid guys aren't coming through in the moments. That's a different kind of pressure than these two not winning a Game 7 of a Stanley Cup final. Is that fair?
That's a good answer.
Well, I mean, I think so. In other words, if you play well, there's no pressure. If you play poorly, there's pressure. So I guess what you're saying is it's an excuse.
You have an answer. When you're being asked the question, you have an answer other than being befuddled and confused as to why it just isn't happened and never has happened when it matters.
Well,
And
to be fair, obviously there's a Leaf relation to this. The Leaf players have never said that publicly. Yeah. They have never come out and said we lost tonight because of pressure or it's too much pressure for us.
Or they've never said we didn't get it done either. Rish, well, I certainly wasn't expecting you to get pissy, Rish. I wasn't expecting that.
Wow, I like it.
Yeah.
I like it.
Well, I'm not. You asked me a question and I'm answering. I'm not getting pissed. No,
I thought there was an angle of pissyism there, but
No, it's just, you guys put me in a position to look like I'm waving an Oiler foam finger.
No, not at all.
Not.
We don't do that on this show. We are all journalists, Rish.
The market has something to do with it too, though, O. And I say this respectfully. Like, this wasn't necessarily you guys. I'm not talking about your show. But I did have to laugh after Game 5 of that last series. I mean, so they're down 3-2 in a really important series. They're 2 wins away from a conference final, and they played like crap. An entire market did a postmortem on an entire franchise and season. It was after Game 5 of a series that's still very much a series. Shanahan's gone, Marner's gone. Like, what's happening? It was just the market there is on the roller coaster with the fans, the ups and downs, and it's just. After Game 5 of that series is not the time to do a postmortem on the franchise, and the entire market does, and they bring that to the players. That's different. And that's why I think people roll their eyes and go, this got a little silly when it was a 3-2 series, didn't it? And I'm not saying your guys' show, because I want
Well, you are, though, in many ways. We yell and scream. But let me, I guess, stick up for Toronto, and the reasoning for that is when you lose and you play like that in the biggest moments year after year after year, and then you justify that reaction 4 nights later, I don't think the market has to apologize at all for reacting the way they did in Game 5. I mean, you're 100% justified in that comment, Schauger, if the Leafs won Game 6 and won Game 7. They need to come on here. You guys are a bunch of buffoons, and what is happening in that market?
No.
Everyone knew when they watched Game 5, they're like, I think I know what's coming. And they were right. It's exactly what was coming because it was worse in Game 7. It was worse. And this is where it is different. You're right. In Edmonton, like McDavid, Draisaitl, the way they play, if they're brutal tomorrow night, it shouldn't, you talk about the game and they played poorly or whatever. It will not lead to some big picture thing because they've burst through that because of what you said. They don't end up on milk cartons. When there's a milk carton 9 years in a row, people are very easily triggered, and I know why they are. And I think it would be different here. I know it would be different if 3 years ago the Leafs won a cup, or 2 years ago they went to a cup final. Then people would be like, all right, I'm going to have a different viewpoint of what's happening here. But there is, it's deep and it's heavy, and there's a lot of psychology, and it's been a rough ride in the biggest moments here. So I'm not surprised people reacted the way they did in Game 5. And I get why you would look at it that way. And I think people in Florida would, and Tampa would, and Colorado would. Other successful teams would look at that and say that's crazy. But it never happens here. They don't do it here. They don't show up and they don't win. So people freak out. And that's the way it goes.
And Ryan, add one quick thing to that too. We talked about it before you came on, early in the 4:00 hour. Edmonton, it was pretty noisy there after those first two games in L.A. I mean,
that's true, Noodles. It wasn't exactly quiet out there.
It was, especially down the stretch. And we'd had you on, and we talked to Struddy, and that, they looked disconnected down the stretch because they didn't have all their players. Guys were banged up. We weren't sure the health and status of McDavid. Draisaitl had time off. And then we weren't sure what's going to go with Kane and Frederick. It was kind of a mishmash, and it rolled into those first two games. And then the Oilers, now it's 10 of 12 they've won, and this looks like a wagon. So it looks a lot different, looks and sounds a lot different. But we could argue a calendar month ago, there was probably a few question marks floating around that market as well, correct?
Yeah, and that's fair. But here's the thing, and this is where the experience of having won some series, been in some battles, battling back from being down 3-0 in a Stanley Cup final, there's an inherent confidence with the group. So when they're down 2-0 in a series, as a media group, we understand, doesn't look good. They're not in a good spot. But we also understand this team has the ability to push back into this thing. So we don't talk about, the whole season being, and do a whole postmortem on every time it's sort of a little bit down. You don't have to go big picture and question everything, because this group has shown it's not out of it, right? So at 2-0, not a good start. Tough look for Skinner. Wonder if they made the right call on the goaltending, all those things. But it's still very much a series. And more importantly, never mind what us dummies are saying, the players in that room are not sitting there with doubt creeping in. Mm-hmm. And I don't know when the doubt starts to creep in for the other guys in Toronto and those guys because of history. I don't know when that starts affecting them. But I do know with this Oiler group, when we grill them, they're confident. Whatever situation they're in, they've seen it and they're confident, and they kind of ignore the noise and just go about their business. They're really, really good at doing that, but they've earned that through a few years here of some heartbreak and some ups and some downs and shooting themselves in the foot and paying a price and learning and figuring it out next series. And there have been a lot of miles here that they've run as a group in the playoffs and learned a lot of things.